The reality was when faced with the assessments, we were just getting ghosted by candidates.
What do you do when candidates are ghosting your skills assessment before they've even met the team? You get creative. Today's guest didn't just tweak her hiring process.
I'd get texts saying, "This is awesome. I'm so much more excited now. I could see myself working for this person."
She found a way to build trust with candidates before the first interview by doing something most recruiters only dream about: getting hiring managers to create short, authentic videos that actually made candidates care.
I needed a way for the hiring managers to not have to give an hour of their time to each candidate, but to have this 1 hour or 15-minute video rather be accessible to each candidate.
The result? 40% increase in skills assessment completions, faster interviews, and even a $1 million rookie who applied after watching one of those videos.
That shoe video, we got 8,931 impressions on LinkedIn from that video. It drew the attention of a candidate that ended up getting hired and then ended up being our rookie of the year last year, bringing in over $1 million in sales in her first year.
This episode is full of smart, scrappy strategies you can use right now. No fancy tools, no budget, just a better way to connect. Let's get into it. Okay, so thank you so much for being on the pod today, Meghan. I'm excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Rhona. I'm excited to be here.
So for listeners who are just getting to know you, what's one thing about your approach to talent acquisition that might surprise folks?
I would say that I'm very transparent with candidates because I value their time. Candor is just crucial. So I cut right to the make or break questions, explaining why things don't align. And I'm just not afraid to pick up the phone. I think a lot of recruiters use just email or LinkedIn messages and just get on the phone, just jump on the call. And surprisingly, most of the time I'm talking to people after hours because who has time to find a job when they're doing their full-time job during the day? So there are moments where I'm texting somebody at 7 p.m. so we can get that interview scheduled because timing is crucial. And I want to get them in the door as quickly as possible if it does align.
Yeah, for sure. What industry do you recruit in?
I'm in the tech industry. I recruit for all roles for a company called OxBlue as their senior talent acquisition manager. I specialize in SaaS sales teams, but I build dev teams, marketing teams. We have client support. We have production. So there's a wide variety that I source for.
Amazing. And we're talking today about a topic that is my absolute favorite. But I want to start a little what was your challenge? What wasn't working in your hiring process that made you say, we need to try something different?
Yes. So my team and I noticed that candidates were not completing a required skills assessment that we had as part of our interview process. The reality was when faced with the assessments, we were just getting ghosted by candidates. And it's understandable. It's tough to get candidates to complete assessments early on in an interview process, but it's also a challenge to wait to do the assessment later in the interview process if you find out that the results of the assessment does not make the candidate align. So it's this catch-22 where you're like, where do I put this assessment in the process and how do I get the candidate engaged early on, even though I need to ask them to do something they don't necessarily want to do?
That is so challenging and then they go online and there's all this don't do work for free, don't do this. And it's we get it, but it's So would you say yes, you were getting ghosted, but do you think that the issue was that they didn't know you guys enough or trust you enough to spend that extra time?
Yes, absolutely. That was the problem. When I first started, our hiring team, because I was the first internal talent acquisition leader they'd had. So I got to kind of rewrite the playbook. But when I first started, the hiring team was doing all the interviewing really early on in the process and then doing the assessments. And then we were finding that folks weren't completing or weren't passing the assessments. And it was a huge waste of our hiring team's time. They just couldn't put that much in so early on. So we shifted things and put the assessment earlier on with me doing an initial pre-screen to get through those make or break questions. So I did my best in the time that I have with these pre-screens to give them that quality, engagement and understanding about the role. But there's only so much we can do early on because we got to get past this assessment hurdle. but how do we do so if they don't feel engaged? That was the challenge. That was kind of the catch-22 that we had to get past. And so I started to brainstorm.
And we'll get into the details of what you actually did. But I wanted to know a little before we get into that. Like, what
Sure.
was the candidate experience and like your hiring manager experience at that point?
So with the way that we had things structured, they hadn't met the hiring managers yet. I was doing the pre-screens and just going through the elimination questions. Like, for example, are you open to a hybrid model? Is the commute to our office reasonable? Does the salary align? Going through, pockets of tenure gaps, that kind of thing, just understanding. So the hiring team wasn't involved yet. It was me, then assessment, because we were trying to protect the hiring manager's time, because part of why I was brought on board was they just didn't have time to interview unless it was going to be those candidates that we knew were a good fit to put in front of those hiring managers.
Amazing. So at that point, like, what made you start thinking maybe content or even video could help you solve this challenge?
So I started to think we've got to get the candidates to care enough to complete a skills assessment before, and they're just not invested in the role yet. So how do we get them to care before meeting the hiring managers? We've got to find a way to get them to meet the hiring managers. But I needed, and video seemed like a great solution. I needed a way for the hiring managers to not have to give an hour of their time to each candidate, but to have this 1 hour or 15-minute video for rather be accessible to each candidate. So we got this candidate buy-in early on in the interview process because we could give them this introduction to the hiring team, get through some frequently asked questions, and get them really engaged in envisioning themselves in the role before they took that assessment. So they got pumped, they got interested, and they said, "Sure, I'll take an assessment."
Cool. Had you seen anyone use video for that before, or was it just like an idea that you got?
I've seen some more formal production videos used in the interview process, and I started this about 3 years ago. So I think back then it was a little bit more formal. But nowadays I am starting to see it catch on that you will have more Scrappy videos, for example, going on within recruiting, whether it's internally or outside agencies utilizing it as well.
Hey, have you subscribed? Let's fix that. It's the easiest way to support this show. So everyone, I've had other people on the podcast talk about this, and I obviously talk about video a lot. And I think one of the main questions I always get is like, well, how do I get my hiring managers to do this? So like, let's talk about, okay, you got the idea, you saw it, you're like, this is going to solve our problem. How did you approach that? How did you get your hiring managers to do this?
So it can be tough because not everyone wants to be in front of a camera. You have got to keep in mind the social anxiety of members of your team. I had one person that I approached about this who is super bubbly and engaging, but the second he got in front of the camera, he was a deer in headlights. So it's not for everyone, for sure. What I would do to engage them, first of all, just let them know, hey, here's what's not working. I have an idea. I want to try it. Can we just do like a little sample and see what the impact is? And if that works, then grow it from there. I started out actually with very scripted, very formulaic videos and learned kind of quickly I needed to shift from that because the hiring team themselves, they're not actors. They couldn't memorize lines. They would get lost in trying to remember what they needed to say next, and it wasn't genuine. It wasn't authentic. So when I approached them, I said, hey, let's try this. We're going to try it a couple different ways. Obviously, the first way didn't work, the scripted way. So we threw that out the window and we said, let's go back. And my team really got them to see that this could work pretty quickly because they could see in the moment and explaining things to a camera, like, wow, okay, this is so much really valuable information that then I don't need to repeat in the interview when we first meet. So for them, they could see that the time efficiency of it was going to be a huge, huge value to them.
Isn't that amazing how it's like you have that idea and you present it and it clicks? It's like, yes, I don't have to say this 20 million times.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
that was really how I started using video with my hiring managers and incorporating it into the process, because I like to say I'm a proud, lazy, worker. I never want to repeat things or do them over and over again. And when I realized that on my phone screens, I kept saying the same thing over and over again, I'm like, let's just do a video. And then people can ask you follow-up questions on that, but not just the basic thing. So
Exactly.
how do you keep it like simple and doable? Like what tools or tactics helped you stay scrappy?
So first of all, like just again, going back to picking the right people, thinking about who that new hire would be involved with when they first started, thinking about the culture of the company and who's going to represent that best and tapping those people on the shoulder, choosing the right people is first. And then not worrying about production value. We did not use our marketing teams. We're a camera company and we didn't use our camera equipment per se. Some of our videos are filmed on iPhones, and the authenticity factor, I think, went a long way because we realized that the candidates, they don't care about how good the lighting looks. They care about what is in the content of what people are saying. So I asked people to really dig deep on and put themselves in candidates' shoes. Like, what would they want to know if they were interviewing? And I learned pretty quickly that outtakes and humor can make a huge difference, just keeping it unscripted and letting it flow. We had a specific incident where we were filming and then there was an outtake because our CSO, he had on crushed velvet Gucci shoes, and he, in between, doing one video and doing another, he picked up the shoes and said to the camera about how you want to make that crushed velvet Gucci shoe money, come work at a company, that does this. And that outtake was something we shared on LinkedIn, and we had more results from that video than we did from just the straight frequently asked questions like, this is what you can expect coming in, like, because it gave insight into a flavor of what it's like to work for that CSO.
Isn't it amazing? I think it's because humans in general, we're nosy, and it was funny. I've posted recently a blooper reel, and I had someone message me and say, oh, for someone selling video services, I don't think you should be doing this. It's not the most effective. And my reply, they were trying to sell me their service, of course.
Of course.
My reply was, actually, my blooper videos are the ones that get me the most leads, and that leads that convert. People just love seeing the humanness of it all. So I can imagine for a candidate, because you're in that situation, you know how hiring is. It's like everyone's trying to put on their best foot and like be the best version of themselves. And when you get to see that, like, no, these people are human, things happen, that's gold right there. And you can never script that.
Yeah, it breaks down so many barriers, how nervous someone can be, how they're too composed and they're not being genuine. And you can break that down so quickly if they can just see that, oh my gosh, the hiring managers are silly too, or they can be human too.
Exactly. So what started to shift once you introduced video into the process? And like, how did you notice these changes?
Yeah. So, I mean, on a metrics level, we saw a 40% increase in skills assessment completion. So just right off the bat, the goal was achieved. That shoe video, which taught us so much in terms of, the humor and the outtakes, we got 8,931 impressions on LinkedIn from that video. Engagement, there were 449 members it reached. It drew the attention of a candidate that ended up getting hired and then ended up being our rookie of the year last year, bringing in like over $1 million in sales in her first year. So we were seeing quite quickly how thinking outside the box was bringing us engaging, amazing, talented candidates that were making such a difference and such an impact in our company. And in addition to that, with the candidates, like I said, they are envisioning themselves in the role. It was helping to give access to these hiring managers early on. So when we were getting into actual interviews, you were seeing the interview itself be that much better. Second tier questions were being asked because they didn't have to spend the time going through what's a day in the life, what's training like, what are challenges in the job. They could ask much more specific questions about stats and quota or about career pathing, just cut right to it and make sure that these are the right candidates and this is the right job for you in a much more engaging and effective manner.
Amazing. Were you getting any, like beyond metrics and what you've mentioned, were you getting any specific feedback from candidates or hiring managers?
Yes. So the candidates were telling us that, I would get messages because again, I've been using my phone to reach out to candidates and to talk to them. I'd get texts saying, this is awesome. I'm so much more excited now. I could see myself working for this person. They're totally in alignment with my own vision of my own career goals. From a hiring manager's perspective, they loved it because once they got to the interviews with these candidates, they could tell who did the work, who watched the videos, who was taking those extra steps to learn and engage. And so much of what we do in the tech industry, we need people who are curious, who want to make that extra effort, watch the podcast, read the books. So when somebody is watching the videos that we send, that says they care, that they are doing the work and want to make the impact and the difference and show and demonstrate that curiosity. So yeah, from both a hiring manager standpoint, it was, yes, we're seeing people who are curious and care. From a candidate perspective, it was, yes, I can connect with this hiring manager.
Let's talk a little about the videos themselves. What types of videos do you create? What types of videos do you create? Like what topics do you cover?
So many, and you can do so much and keep it simple. So first of all, keep your videos short. I like to do a la carte videos where it's just one question at a time per video so that they can pick and choose what they want to watch. They want to watch them all, great. If they just have one question that they want to get to the bottom of, then they can cut straight down, the table of contents of your video options and look at it. So that you can do a welcome video, a day in the life. You can do challenges a new hire might face in the role. What does training look like? You could do a tour of the office. You can do what to expect in the interview process or during orientation or during onboarding in those 30, 60, 90 days. I've had hiring managers who want to do ones about career pathing, and we've even gotten into ones about how we care about mental health and that's important to us. And we're kind of redefining, especially in sales, the mental health journey. And when we've even talked about that just amongst the sales team, we've seen a huge result just even years later about how salespeople say that mental health is just not something that's talked about a lot. And it's so important and it's such a stressful environment. So that's actually something that I'm thinking of launching next in terms of just how we brand ourselves to our candidates is that we care in that regard. So you can keep it very generic. You can go really specific into the brand and culture of your company and things that differentiate you from your competitors.
And where do you store these videos? Like, how do candidates get to see and binge through your videos?
So they're sent via hyperlink in the email with the skills assessment. So it's, hey, here's a test for you, but also here is a full list of information for you to, peruse and engage with. So that's how the candidate is seeing it. We use Vineyard to store it. And I have a wonderful marketing team, and they do help just a little bit with this in terms of uploading them, adding just, potentially a caption at the bottom about who the person is speaking with and saving them appropriately in the system.
Perfect. Yeah. So how has doing these videos changed your relationship with hiring managers and their involvement in the recruiting process?
So I think it's added a huge level of trust because they now can see that new ideas work. They now are willing to try other new things because they have seen the impact of these videos. They recognize that sometimes these things work, sometimes they don't, but that's okay. But I love that we have this next level of strategy and deployment that we can play around with, and that we're now engaging in a kind of an outside the box methodology discussion together, because they can come to me with ideas like, hey, would you be open to trying this? And I'll say, yeah, why not? Because we now know that we can reach candidates in so many new and different ways. Like we're brainstorming. There's lots coming because we have seen that level of success.
That's amazing. And that's, I think, our goal as any recruiter, any TA person out there is to really have that partnership with the hiring managers where you're bringing ideas, they're bringing ideas, because at the end of the day, you all have the same goal.
Stakeholders are so important, whether it's your candidate stakeholder or your hiring manager stakeholder, and learning what they need and how to effectively be their advocate is ultimately how talent acquisition can move forward. And to integrate, AI, of course, if needed, or video to that matter, because then you can add that extra level.
So there's lots of people who are on board. We've talked about how well this has helped with the hiring managers, but let's face it, there's usually one or two naysayers within the organization. Legal, they're my friends. Did you get any pushback from legal, from marketing, or from anyone in the organization on this initiative?
At the beginning, yes, because we wanted to make sure we were branding effectively. But when it got down to talking about, I think that's why we started with the script at first, and just making sure that it fit parameters that we wanted to, of course, be in alignment with. And we realized pretty quickly from a legal perspective, we're talking about training, we're talking about challenges in the job. I think we can tread lightly on that and save those tough questions for the in-person interviews.
Amazing. Yeah, it's always good to have that. It's like, yes, you're presenting yourself, always think about the brand. And we love legal. I love legal around here. They keep us in check. But it's their job to think about these things when everyone else is excited. But I always
Absolutely.
like to give people those practical tips of how you went around that, because that is the reality of what will happen. So
keep it simple. Keep it simple. That's the best way to start. And get on board with your recruiting is sales, but recruiting is also marketing. Get on board with your marketing team when you start at a company, because you want to make sure you're aligned perfectly with how they have the brand, and then potentially contribute to that if there's things you see missing that might be for a candidate and not a client, that you can utilize and ask marketing to enhance and help you to regurgitate in the manner in which they want to have everything presented.
For sure. So if someone is ready to start with this, what kinds of videos would you recommend that they start with? What's the low hanging fruit?
Like I said, the welcome video, the ones that are just going to talk about the role itself and what the interview process looks like. But I would always just say, put yourself in the shoes of someone who is job hunting. What would you want to know? If you were going to go out on an interview tomorrow, what questions would you have? Because I've even noticed in the last 6 months, those questions are changing. For example, AI, again, it's not AI that's going to take your job. It's people who know how to use AI who are. So I'm noticing that those types of questions are emerging. What AI skills can you bring to the table? What tools do you already integrate, for example? So just putting yourself in the person's shoes of what questions as an interviewer you might ask, or as a candidate you might ask. And then just remember that your biggest commodity is influence. These videos are not about production value. They're about getting the candidate's attention and keeping it. So just stand out. Have a funny outtake shoe video. What does it mean to work at your company? Well, here's why. And it's just a couple takes of some really great culture events that you've had recently. I've also seen an emerging trend, which I love, where candidates want to make sure companies care in a community service standpoint, and having an answer for that at the ready. So, it can be simple and easy, or it can be generic and broad, but can talk about the messaging of your company that, really does make you stand out because you guys care. Maybe it's about mental health. Maybe it's about the community, but stand out and start with just, what would you want to know if you were job hunting tomorrow?
So if someone's listening and they're like, great, I'm sold. I want to do this. This is a great idea. But they don't know where to start. What's step one?
I would say talk to the hiring manager you work with the most and just have a brainstorming session, because that's the person you're engaging with the most. They're probably the final decision maker in the interview process. And I would start with them and say, I need you on board with this. And would you be willing to do this? And get them excited about it. Because step one is, it's not you wanting to do it. It's the hiring managers wanting to do it. So start with that big fish, the final decision maker for, like let's say it's your COO or your CSO, depending on the department, and get them excited about doing this with you and explain to them why this could work. And then start brainstorming with them, because it should be an engaging and interactive process. I definitely also learned early on making the videos, I can't be just telling the hiring managers what to do. I need it to be a conversation, and I need them to feel like their ideas are included. So to start with them, I would say.
Let's get back on a practical level. So, right, you spoke to your hiring manager, you get them in a room, whether it's virtual or in person. If you work in person, record the videos. How do you go about editing them?
So that is where I have my lovely marketing team to help occasionally. But to be honest, I don't really edit them. I want it to be free flowing. If people make mistakes, that's actually okay. We've had one where, again, humor and authenticity count, but we've had one where people kind of are like, wait, you know what? Let me rephrase that. And that's okay. And again, candidates like that it's not scripted and can tell when people kind of flub over a word or something that they're being genuine. So I try not to edit them if I can, to be honest.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So we're going to shift gears for a second, and I'm totally putting you on the spot here because I did not prep you for this, but this is this is a segment that I like to call, I don't like to call it. It's called Plead the Fifth. And I'm going to ask you 3 rapid fire questions.
Okay.
You're allowed to plead the fifth only once.
Oh, okay.
You have to answer 2 questions, right? You can answer them all as well.
This is like inside the actor's studio, the rapid fire at the end. Love it.
Yes. So let's go. Have you ever pushed a questionable candidate forward just to prove a point to a hiring manager?
Oh, yes. And I can give a better example. I can give a story. I had a candidate that I was pretty confident didn't want to leave their job. They just wanted to they wanted to come back to their job after getting an offer from a company and say, give me a raise. And I said, look, if I want to show you this person because I think that you think that they're great on paper, but in reality, if you talk to them, you're going to see what I see. But I knew that the hiring manager liked the person, and I pushed them forward anyway to prove the point that I didn't think they were the right fit, but you had to talk to them to see it and to know that their heart wasn't really in leaving their current company.
Were you right?
Yes. But I didn't. And I mean, I wish I weren't right in the sense that they would have been a great candidate if they were ready to leave their current role, but they weren't. This was at a company prior to my current one. But yeah, I could just tell.
Perfect. Let's call that recruiter intuition. I think we all develop it after a few years. So, have you ever faked enthusiasm for a role that you wouldn't personally recommend to anyone that you know?
That is part of why I got out of agency recruiting. Because I didn't like an agency recruiting that not every company was created equal, and some I just couldn't stand behind in terms of I knew they weren't perhaps the best company. I knew they had high turnover, and that was forced enthusiasm that I didn't like. I really like being, integrity is important to me, and that was tough for me, which is part of why I shifted. And I know not all agency recruiting is like that, but there are times where you're faced with roles that you're not excited about, or that's just the truth.
Amazing. So, haven't
pleaded the fifth yet?
Yeah,
Sorry.
haven't pleaded the fifth yet. So let's see. Have you ever ignored a hiring manager's must-haves because you knew it was just BS?
I will rephrase it as not BS, but unrealistic. Yes, because transferable skills-based hiring, that is the way to really effectively hire. And sometimes those must-haves, you have to show the pulse of the market. Sometimes I have to provide metrics of, look, one of two things has to change, either the salary requirements or the experience requirements, because you can't have both. So yes, I have absolutely, I don't want to say ignored them or recognize their BS, but I've recognized they're unrealistic. And that's part of my job, is to be a pulse for the market, to show what is out there and what you're going to get. And that's changed so much even in 3 years, because coming out of the pandemic, it was a candidate's market. Then it shifted back to a client or company's market. And now it's kind of in between again. So those needs change. Sometimes hiring managers can have crazy high expectations. Sometimes they need to recognize that there are less candidates out there than there are qualified candidates. And you just have to be that market representation and let them know the tough truths.
So you survived Plead the Fifth. Honestly, those were some pretty solid answers. Before we let you go, final question. Actually, not final question.
Okay.
Going back to our video topic, is there anything else you want listeners to know that I haven't asked you?
I love that question. I always recommend that question as a final question for candidates to ask in an interview. Is there anything I haven't asked that I should? Candidates are watching. That's my tip. As far as the videos go, I would say something you haven't asked. I think you covered pretty much everything. I would say, let me think if there's anything I would add. We talked about how with the videos, candidates can come in and they can ask those second tier questions. You could keep that in mind when you're shaping your videos. Like you can set it up that way. So it's not a skills assessment per se, but it's almost like, okay, we can specifically target videos that cover these things because we don't want to talk about them in the interview. Like there's something to that I think I'm still working on and still playing with. So I'm speaking about this in real time with you, Rhona, but I feel like getting candidates to that first interview, but at a next level, I feel like there is something that we can do with these videos to inform them, engage them, and really continue to formulate creating that experience. So I'm still just thinking about this in real time.
Yeah, and let's workshop that a bit, because it is really the goal. We want the interviews, at least that's my goal when I use video in the process. We want the interviews to be like where they ask the real questions, because remember, both of us are assessing fit during an interview. So the more information you give to a candidate up front, one, they can self-select out if something that they see beforehand, they're like, yeah, this is a deal breaker. I could never work with someone who wears velvet shoes. Okay, fine. No one's time is wasted and you move on. But you want them to get to the interview and really ask the real questions, not what's the culture like? Well, now if you show them the culture, they can have questions of, I saw this video about where you guys were doing and giving back. For me, it's very important to give back to this type of organization. Is that something that you do? So how would you go about these are your FAQs. This is what you're really asking. How would you go about anticipating those questions that can then get them to that you can answer on video so that they can go into interviews with the second tier questions only?
Honestly, it might even be like a final video where the hiring manager says something like, here are some takeaways that I want you to think about because I'm looking forward to your feedback when you come into the interview. I don't want to say it's more homework or more assessment work, but I have a question for you as the hiring, because the hiring manager is just giving information in these videos. So maybe, and we haven't done this yet, but I like this idea. Rhona, you're giving me thoughts. Maybe it's a video where the hiring manager says, here are some key takeaways that I want you to think about. And I really look forward to your information and your insights when you come to the interview, so that they do have the time to do the work in advance. And they do have the time to think about it. Like maybe it's about what is the sellable differentiator about our product that is making us competitive? Or it's a deep dive dev question about, is Linux still relevant? It could be really anything that the hiring manager just really might want to see a unique and refreshing perspective on from the candidate, but we give them the opportunity and the time to think about it and come to the interview with that answer.
I absolutely love that because I'm team give candidates the questions for interviews beforehand. And I know that's not a popular thing and we can go back and forth and I've gone back and forth with everyone. But I think that's a happy medium where it's like maybe you don't give all of the questions ahead of time, but the really important things, because that's going to be something important that the hiring manager is wanting to know. You give them that kind of time to prep for that so that they can get their best answer for the interview. I love that idea.
Thank you, Rhona. I think you've given me my homework for the day.
Excited to see that. So now, really, the final question. If someone listening wants to connect, just like swap ideas or just tell you that they've tried something because of this episode, what's the best way they can get in contact with you?
Oh, LinkedIn is always a wonderful starting point. Please feel free to connect with me. I do my best to respond to all messages. And I even have candidates that write me saying they're going to graduate college in a year and they want to start the process now. And I'm like, yeah, let's have a conversation. I'll tell you who to get in touch with. So, I'm happy to talk about specific jobs at my company. I'm happy to talk about the videos. I'm happy to talk from a candidate perspective or a recruiter perspective about anything I can do to support. So yeah, LinkedIn messages are an easy way to start. Just connect with me.
Amazing. And I will link all of Meghan's contact information and, well, not all of it. I'll link Meghan's LinkedIn in the show notes. This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for being on the pod today.
Thanks for having me, Rhona. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much for listening. If you're enjoying the Workfluencer pod, share it with someone who's changing how we talk about work or who should be. And hey, if this episode gave you ideas or inspiration, leave us a 5-star review. Reviews help other listeners find us. And honestly, it makes my day. If you try anything Meghan talked about today, let me know. I'd love to hear how it goes. Workfluencer is produced by Perceptible Studios. Learn more about how we can help you use video to attract, engage, and retain qualified talent at perceptiblestudios.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll chat with you next week.